Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakambithamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Apta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatadine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Tirtha Swami Iti Namine. Hare Krishna. So grateful for this opportunity to be together again. His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj is still bringing us together. Unity and diversity in bhakti is perhaps the deepest subject of all Vedic knowledge. It extends to the diversity in the highest realm of the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. Whether one is a parrot or a cow or a tree or a plant, old or younger, river, Brahmin, cowherd boy, cowherd girl, left wing, right wing. So many diversities are there, but yet they're perfectly united. Even when they fight, argue, make strategies to defeat each other, there's perfect unity. And that unity is based on one principle, the principle of prema, or unconditional, unmotivated love. Everyone is perfectly satisfied in whatever role they're playing because they know they're pleasing Krishna. They don't have to impress anyone or anything. Everyone knows they're pleasing Krishna. And they know that Krishna's love is with them. In Goloka Vrindavan, no one thinks they're great. Even Srimati Radharani, she does not think she's great. Everyone only thinks Krishna's great. Even if they're seeing him as a little baby child, they're not seeing him great as God, but they just want to please him. That affection, that love is beyond all conceptions of relativity. When Srila Prabhupada told us, you can show your love for me by how you cooperate in this great mission. He especially said, cooperate for this mission, because this mission was his life, his soul, his everything. And the success of our mission will be so much according to how we cooperate. And with all the diversity in this material world where we have all kinds of egos and conditionings, we can't just make material adjustments for sustainable unity. Srila Prabhupada would cite there was World War I, and then they created United Nations. And World War II, there was League of Nations, United Nations, but still so many conflicts. And when there's not war, it's just basically somehow or other some temporary adjustment that is bound to fall. When Srila Prabhupada said, you will show your love for me by how you cooperate for this mission, it wasn't just a request. It wasn't just an instruction. It was something so deep. Because this mission can only survive in cooperation in that sense. When we recognize how Srila Prabhupada loved us, and we're reciprocating with gratitude, even if it's difficult. Real love is tested. Even in the spiritual world, in Krishna's pastimes, Krishna left Vrindavan after the gopis and gopas gave their hearts, their souls, their lives, everything exclusively to his service. Even after Krishna encouraged gopis by revealing his heart, that for your love I cannot repay you even with everything I have in an entire lifetime of Brahma. But then he left with Balar, his dearmost brother and friends. They left together and promised they would be back soon. But 100 years passed and they still hadn't come back. Krishna tested their love, but their love increased more and more and more and more. And even in separation from Krishna, the unity, it's not that everybody started fighting after Krishna left. Their unity, their love for each other increased more and more because their love for Krishna was increasing more and more. They recognized how each Vrajabasi is so dear to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada describes Vaikuntha consciousness is when a devotee feels that every other devotee is better than me. That's Vaikuntha. And take that to a much higher and deeper level, and it is Vrindavan. How do we see every devotee better than me? How do the gopis think that a tree is better than them? Because they're not comparing. They're grateful, honor that this other devotee is pleasing Krishna. In this temple room of Sri Radha Damodar 20 years ago, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj gave his last lecture to the devotees. How many thousands and thousands of lectures Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj gave all over the world. And just a few weeks before Sri Radha Damodar and Srila Prabhupada brought him to the spiritual world, he called devotees for his last lecture. I believe even when he was in a very ill state, he would speak on Sundays and address the devotees. And during this lecture here, the temple room was filled with hundreds and hundreds of devotees. In many ways, it was such a deeply emotional experience. He was personally declaring that for most of you, the next time you see me is when my body is being carried for samadhi. He was going into this nirjan bhajan, and he explained so beautifully why. He was explaining how happy he was. Although he had tumors all over his body, arthritis, diabetes, amputations, emaciations, no sleep. He's describing these things. Physically, it was horrendous. That was his word. But he was so happy. He was so grateful that by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, said, we could all serve together for so many years. He was so grateful for the association of God brothers, God sisters, disciples, and everyone. He was so grateful for anyone he could share Srila Prabhupada's message with. What could be better than that? And he was also so grateful because he knew for sure, with profound realization, where he was going, where he was being called to. He didn't just say these things. He was looking out at all of you, remembering all the beautiful things they did together. He also said, I'm so grateful to Srila Prabhupada that I was allowed to remove some of the pains and sufferings from each of your lives. And this was very much at the heart and core of Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj's personal identity. When he was a new brahmachari and he read the story of Vasudev Datta, he wanted to live in that spirit. And when this is in your internal prayers to live in the spirit of Vasudev Datta, you have to be very serious. Vasudev Datta met Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri. And he cried. He prayed. You are the Supreme Lord. You can do anything. I have one desire that I've been holding in my heart. Please fulfill this one prayer. When I see the people of the world suffering due to the threefold miseries, my heart breaks. Please bless me that I can take the sinful reactions of everyone in the universe on my own head. Please bless me that I may suffer perpetually so that everyone will receive your mercy and be liberated and be with you. Although I'm very insignificant and unqualified, still I'm begging you to fulfill this prayer. And he meant it. How many of us in our daily lives are struggling and sometimes even praying to Krishna to resolve this little thing, this little dispute, or this little bodily pain, or this little complication in my finances. We become so distracted by these things. This little bit of suffering mentally, physically. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. in the Mahabhava, the mood of Srimati Radharani, who's come to give to the world the ecstasies of Radha's love for Krishna. Vasudev Datta, he knows who Lord Chaitanya is. He knows what he has come to give to the world. But he's not praying for those things. He's trying to suffer perpetually everyone's karma in the universe so everyone else could be happy. Why? Because he understood so deeply nothing else will please Lord Chaitanya more. Namo Mahabharanaya Krishna Prema Padayat. Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauda Tveshe Namah. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to this world to bestow the ultimate benediction through the chanting of the holy names. Prema Bhakti. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at one time he prayed that my heart breaks when I see people suffering without Krishna. What can I do? Because Vasudev Datta knew how much Lord Chaitanya loved every living entity. If one small person like me stays in this world and suffers forever, but everyone else, all other countless living beings could be happy with you. That's something beautiful. If this is what pleases you, my Lord, this is what I want. Yes, he recognized how the Supreme Personality of Godhead has such intimate love and affection for every spirit soul. Mamaivam so jiva loke jiva bhutashana. And however conditioned, however sinful, however distracted a spirit soul may be in whatever species of life, my Lord loves them. Let them all be with Krishna. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this prayer of Vasudev Datta, because he knew he was totally serious, this is what he wanted. Lord Chaitanya began to cry. His voice was choked up. And he said, this is not a surprise what you're saying, Vasudev Datta, because you are Prahlad. Prahlad Maharaj prayed for the same thing. And actually, Srila Haridas Thakur prayed for the same thing. Now, when many of us first read that story, it deeply moved us. The prayers of Vasudev Datta. But Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was praying to actually make this the very principle of the spirit of his life in the service of Srila Prabhupada. What will please Srila Prabhupada in assisting him in this great mission of compassion? He describes his first meeting with Srila Prabhupada. he received an extraordinary mystical instruction. As was described this morning when he first started coming to temple. He was very different than everyone. He was a graduate of Princeton University. There wasn't many college graduates from Ivy League schools in our movement at the time. As far as I know, there wasn't any. And he was a civil rights activist. And he had an incredible career. I think he was working for a public or government defending office in New Jersey. And very charismatic. So when he started coming to the temple, the devotees they didn't know how to deal with him. But Rukmini Devi and Bharadraj Prabhu and Jayadvaita Maharaj were very kind to him. So there was going to be a program that they were just developing in Harlem, in Black Harlem in Manhattan. And a meeting of those devotees who were going to help along with Bhakti Jan Prabhu. They met with Srila Prabhupada. And I believe this was Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj's first direct encounter with Srila Prabhupada. He said Srila Prabhupada allowed him to sit right next to him. And Srila Prabhupada was glancing at him with so much affection. But he said Srila Prabhupada was glancing at everyone with great affection. And he was giving instructions. Then Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, who was then John, he asked his first question. It wasn't even a question. It was a statement. He said, Srila Prabhupada, there is prejudice in your movement. Srila Prabhupada astonished him with his reply. He said, this prejudice is nonsense because it's the bodily concept of life. But if you are disturbed by it, then you are also in the bodily concept of life. What makes you different than them? You are also nonsense. That's quite a bold answer. And if Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was on the bodily concept of life, he probably would have been insulted. But he took that answer so deeply in his heart. And it very much shaped his whole spirit of devotional service. It is a tendency in this world for all of us, any conditioned soul. When things don't go our way, or when people don't appreciate who we are, we feel like a victim. Either we want to retaliate or we just become disturbed. But Srila Prabhupada was teaching him, you are an eternal spirit soul, and every living being is an eternal spirit soul. And a Vaishnava is one who lives by that principle. He describes he was walking with Srila Prabhupada once with a group of other devotees. And he asked Srila Prabhupada, actually, Srila Prabhupada just turned to him and spoke a verse from Bhagavad Gita, the second chapter, text 64. Ragadveshavamuktaishtu vishayan indrayashcharan atma visharladhi atma prasadam adhigachyati. One who is free from attachment and aversion, one who can control one's senses by practicing the regulative principles of freedom, receives the complete mercy of the Lord. How many verses have we heard? When he heard that verse from the mouth of Srila Prabhupada, the next day he started chanting minimum 42 rounds every day. He started eating only once a day. And even that, it was just things that were really kind of simple. It wasn't, he was eating a big feast. He was just eating some very simple food. In order to chant his rounds and do all his service, he was getting up about midnight, practically giving up sleeping. And he did this every day for years and years. Because Srila Prabhupada would be pleased if he was giving up attachment and aversion and controlling his senses by following the regulative principles of freedom. He would get Srila Prabhupada's mercy. Another time he describes, he was in Montreal and he was guarding for some time Srila Prabhupada when Srila Prabhupada would be in his room. And there was a glass window where he could sometimes see in Srila Prabhupada's, where he would do his writing. He was astonished to see how often Srila Prabhupada would read his own books. Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was feeling, if Srila Prabhupada is reading his own books, how much does he want us to read his books? By that simple thing, he became perhaps the most famous book distributor in the history of Iskcon. But how did he do it? In his final lecture here in Gita Nagari, Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj described why he did what he did, because he was so often misunderstood. Sometimes we see photos of Maharaj with clothes that usually devotees don't wear. Sometimes he would preach in ways that were quite out of the box, we may say. We were describing briefly last night. Srila Prabhupada was so deeply pleased with him. When Srila Prabhupada was in London, and he was so emaciated and physically incapacitated, he called Ganasham to his room and asked him to sit behind the desk with Srila Prabhupada, right beside him. He rubbed Ganasham's head and cried, and then said, "Your life is successful," and embraced him. Maybe one or two or three devotees within the history of our movement were given that type of appreciation by Srila Prabhupada, if any. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he was so deeply moved. He said, "Srila Prabhupada, we are only doing anything because you're forcing us." Srila Prabhupada's voice became very bold. He said, "Yes, this is Guru Parampara. My Guru Maharaj had forced me, and now I'm forcing you. In this way, things will go on." But this is very defining in an understanding of why and how Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj preached the way he did. Srila Prabhupada would love to hear his reports. He would go into a type of samadhi in ecstasy, hearing the reports that came every 2 weeks of Ganasham's preaching. But behind the Iron Curtain, he was going to these professors at university after university. He was wearing suit and tie. He had a wig. He didn't present himself as a Vaishnava or a devotee. He presented himself as a representative of a Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, which nobody in East, behind the Iron Curtain, nobody knew what Bhaktivedanta Book Trust was. They just knew it was a book publishing house, and he had his card. And he would speak in ways that were relevant in such a way so that people would receive Srila Prabhupada's mercy in the form of the books. And most of the professors he reached rejected him. It's not that everybody just surrendered. And sometimes governments were hunting for him. And when somebody says there's somebody from some, who's breaking our laws, and he has a black body, and there's nobody else practically in the country with that color body, and they're hunting for you, it's hard to be incognito. It would have been much easier to come back to America or somewhere else. Well, he was never discouraged. Sometimes he would run, sometimes he would hide. He would do his service somewhere at one university, then get on a train and go to another city, and then another and another. Practically every day he was going another place by trains, by buses. But yet somehow or other, according to the time and the place and the circumstance, he was giving Srila Prabhupada's pure, unadulterated message in Srila Prabhupada's books. And there were hundreds and hundreds of book distributors. Why Srila Prabhupada was so especially grateful to weep in affection for what he was doing. Because he was literally risking everything. Totally undercover. It's not that you go into the professor's office and say, Hare Krishna. He'd give a card and say, I am a representative of Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, and we have these books. And he would somehow try to convince. He described when the library party first began before he went to Eastern Europe. He met with Srila Prabhupada, with some of the others, and they asked him, Srila Prabhupada for detailed instructions of how they should bring these standing orders of the entire library of everything Prabhupada wrote, and to convince them to buy everything that Srila Prabhupada was going to write. Srila Prabhupada's instruction: try your best and Krishna will help you. That was it. And then he said that if a professor makes an order, keep that document of the order and show it to other professors. And it worked. He described he went to Brigham Young University in Utah and met one very esteemed professor. And he was so attracted by Srila Prabhupada's books. He's a great scholar. He actually not only wrote out the order, but he also recommended to others. And he said in that one university, Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj went to every department. He said they got 17 orders for Srila Prabhupada's entire libraries of books. And some years ago, I was in Salt Lake City and in Spanish Fork, Utah, where there's a beautiful temple built. And I remember I asked Charu Prabhu, who built that incredible temple there, why did you come here and build this temple? It's Spanish Fork, Utah is not like New York City or Los Angeles. And that whole project, he described, it was inspired because he heard how Bhakti Tirtha Swami Ganesham Prabhu, he went to that university and sold 17 standing orders. So he was thinking this must be a very fertile place. And today there's so many thousands of people coming to that. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, that beautiful experience of Srila Prabhupada embracing him and thanking him. And the day after, that was his last physical meeting with Srila Prabhupada. And after Srila Prabhupada departed from this physical world, the amount of separation, the amount of almost helplessness in the hearts of all Srila Prabhupada's disciples was so overwhelming. But Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, in his last lecture here, he was describing the condition of all the devotees when Srila Prabhupada left. And he said some people, they drifted away. But others, they understood how deeply they had to go into Srila Prabhupada's teachings and spirit in order to carry on. And how he did that. We have heard from so many others how Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj had true, pure, deep compassion. He cared. He didn't want to just get some popularity. He didn't want to just get some points. He wanted to please Srila Prabhupada by transforming people's hearts. And that was the motivation by which he was so creative in how he reached people. Those who were fortunate enough to know Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj know absolutely for sure he was 100% totally chaste and faithful to Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's teachings. He was a very scholarly philosopher. He knew the Siddhanta of Srila Prabhupada. He knew Srila Prabhupada's views of Mayavad and Sahajya and gross materialism. And the goal of pure unalloyed devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He knew so deeply and appreciated the lives of our acharyas, residents of Goloka Vrindavan. Internally, always, his goal and his purpose. Thank you. His meditation was the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. He never deviated from that. That yet in the mood of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and Srila Prabhupada, how to reach the people of this world
various types of people with various mindsets, how to ultimately give this message to them. How to, just like in Eastern Europe, when Srila Prabhupada appreciated so much, how to reach this person to take the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavad Gita. So we may say, creative ways that he would sometimes dress or sometimes write, or issues that he would sometimes address, they were always with the pure Siddhanta of our Sampradaya in his heart, to give that to these people. But for some people, this is the way we could reach them. When he would be in Iskcon temples, whether it was in South America or Africa or India or North America or Russia, he would just be preaching pure Krishna consciousness, singing wonderful kirtans, dancing in ecstasy. But when he was out in the preaching field, he would just, with the compassion of his heart, how to reach these people. His whole life was taking risks. Our movement never had any real success in Western Africa. He went there practically alone. His Holiness Chandramauli Maharaj was speaking some things last night, and I believe when I finish my little talk today, some of the devotees from Africa will be speaking. He went alone with nothing to a place that was so neglected by Lord Chaitanya, by our movement for so many years, because it just seemed impossible. And through his incredible creative ways, he was giving pure devotional service, as Srila Prabhupada in our Parampara teaches. He started dozens of temples, farm communities, schools. He was almost constantly on television shows, radio shows, magazines, newspapers. He was preaching to millions, hundreds of millions of people. He was meeting heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, high priests. He was made the high chief of the Wari community in Nigeria. So prestigious. And yet, through various means, he's giving pure Krishna consciousness. He may open the door with some creative methods, but never, ever, ever did he compromise. He didn't dilute the teachings. He just gave it in doses that would be accessible to people's minds and hearts to change their lives. And for any persons who thought that he was doing something against our principles, was only those persons who were seeing the external. They didn't really understand what was his purpose? What was his heart? What was his conviction? Who he was? Actually, while he was doing all those things, I would meet him in Washington, D.C. sometimes at the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology. Yes? And he would just come back from Africa. Or he was giving lectures in Washington, Howard University and other places in very creative ways. And sometimes writing about things that I really didn't understand. And I never will. You know, I don't know what a mothership is and all that stuff. But but there were a lot of people who were really into that. And he could see that those people who were really into that were really good candidates to understand Krishna consciousness. And by just beginning with these tough subjects, he can open the doors to Vaishnavas. And so many of you, that was the effect. But we would take walks. And as we walked, we talked. Then we would take prasad together and talk. We walk and talk. And then we would sit and talk. And sing. And then sit and talk. And Brajalila Devi, you remember when we were taking rest at night, they would just put 2 sheets on the floor in his room, and we would just lay next to each other and talk. And every now and then we fell asleep. And then we got up and chanted our rounds and danced with devotees, and then we talked. And every talk was about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's beautiful pastimes with his devotees, and about Srila Prabhupada's great gift to us, and describing our appreciation for other devotees in this movement, and also discussing many of the problems and the sufferings that devotees and other people in the world are going through. But in his heart, he just wanted to meditate, hear about, discuss the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pastimes in Vrindavan. That's where he was coming from, and that's where he was trying to take the people of the world. So yes, when we understand who Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj really was, then these somewhat inconceivable creative ways in which he tried to reach various types of people in various places, it actually heightens our appreciation. How much Srila Prabhupada was calling him from within the heart to present the Siddhanta of Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya in these various ways. And in his last lecture here at Gita Nagari, obviously I've been listening to it. He was explaining to all of us, because he knew there was criticisms and he knew there was confusions, but he was just revealing his heart. And with much passion, he described, I never deviated from our Siddhanta ever. And it's true. He explained, I may have made mistakes and all of these things, but I was truly trying to serve Srila Prabhupada by presenting Prabhupada as he is, according to people's state of consciousness. And at a certain stage, well, actually, beside perhaps His Holiness Jaipatak Swami Maharaj, I can't think of any devotee in the history of Iskcon that traveled like Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj. And when we would meet in Washington, D.C. or other places, he would describe, sometimes crying, the struggles and the sufferings and the confusions that different devotees in different parts of the world were enduring. He really cared. It was intolerable to his heart that these devotees, either first generation or second generation, that they came to give their hearts to serve Srila Prabhupada, and they were suffering. Maybe suffering due to their previous conditionings in life, sufferings because of various prejudices against them, suffering because of disappointments of leaders, suffering because of conflicts. He took every devotee's suffering so seriously. And he wanted to make a difference. And he knew what it was like to be misunderstood. And really, it is incredible how bold, courageous he was in standing up for people who were not getting proper rights to serve Srila Prabhupada in our movement. In his heart, he was such a profound, traditional Gaudiya Vaishnava. But he was willing, when he went out into the world to preach, he was willing to transcend all stereotypes of Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition in order to reach people. We may agree, we may disagree. That is something that will always be. But we should know what his motive, his purpose, and his heart was. And he reached people in various nations, in various races, and various modes of material nature that practically no one else has ever reached. But at a certain stage, when his body was incapacitated completely, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj in one sense, he just became himself. And that Nirjan Bhajan, not, he just wanted to taste the sweetness of remembering Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates and Krishna and Sri Radharani and their associates. And that was his entire life. One day we were sitting together, and it was a day that the wave of the pains of his diseases was like a tsunami. His entire body was just trembling with agony. And Ekavir Prabhu and Dhruva Prabhu, they picked him up and put him on a chair, and he was trembling. And we were trying to talk. Our discussions every day just began with reading and discussing Madhavendra Puri's passing from this world. And that went into hours of discussing the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Krishna and our acharyas and Srila Prabhupada. And discussing our great concerns for our movement also from this perspective. But on that day, it seemed impossible for him to be attentive. The pain was so excruciating. So we just began to chant together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. And as we were chanting just like that, his body was still trembling. He smiled. Actually, we've all seen him smile. But I never saw him smile like this. It was an incredible smile. It was radiating with joy. And his eyes were glistening. He looked ecstatic. And tears began to flow from his eyes. And he was just like savoring the nectar of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Physically, nothing changed. As far as his condition, he lit up the room with happiness. And as he was moving his head back and forth in such total satisfaction, he said, "It doesn't get any better than this." And my health was relatively all right, but I wasn't experiencing this. And I was just listening to him. He said, "It doesn't get any better than this." He said, "We are there." I said, "Maharaj, where?" He said, "We are in the spiritual world of Goloka Vrindavan." He said, "I have no fear," because he said, "I know where I'm going, and I'm so grateful." And he said, he said, "I am tasting Radha and Krishna in their holy names in such a way that I would not change the position I'm in today for anything else in the world." And he meant it. That was Bhakti Tirtha Swami. That was his heart. When I first came here, I'm remembering I was at the Festival of Inspiration at New Vrindavan under the direction of Anuttama Prabhu. He was coordinating that festival. And I was supposed to give the plenary lecture in the afternoon of, or just before lunch prasad on Sunday. And Saturday night, Brajalila Devi called me. And she gave the phone to Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj. He said, "The doctor has given me at the most 3 days more to live. I'd like to see you before I leave this world." And that Sunday, he was going to give like a little class in his lawn near the institute. So I told Anuttama Prabhu, "I have to leave." And Anuttama Prabhu said, "Well, what if we reschedule your class for the early morning, and then you could do that?" And just to please him, I said, "All right." Because like the highlight of the festival was that Sunday up to the Sunday feast. So I spoke short talk to all the devotees. And then I said, "Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj is going to be speaking today, and the doctors have given him 3 more days to live, so I have to go now. Please forgive me." And I apologized to Anuttama Prabhu. "I'm sorry, I'm disappointing, but I have to leave." And I drove out. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw about 25 cars behind me. And one of those cars was Anuttama Prabhu and Rukmini Devi. practically probably 80% of the festival inspiration left in the middle of the festival because they wanted to go to Gita Nagari to be with Bhakti Tirtha. And then we all arrived, and he spoke in the lawn for a few minutes, and then invited everyone into his rooms. And I've spoken this story many times, but I pray that I could speak so many more times forever, because it was so meaningful. There was so many varieties of people in that room. People who were just sincerely struggling to be Krishna conscious, people who were doing wonderful things, people who had been abused, people who had lost their faith. So many people were in that room. And I think this is the same incident that Anuttama Prabhu, you were discussing yesterday in your beautiful talk. And Maharaj was just sitting on his chair. He was emaciated. His leg was amputated. Everyone could see numerous tumors in practically all parts of his body, just big lumps. And yet he was speaking with such conviction, with such compassion, with such care, with such love. Everyone in the room. Was anyone in that room? Raise your hands. Everyone was transformed. I was looking around, 100% people, as far as I could see, were weeping. And then he was meeting people were coming up to him individually as they were leaving the room. He was speaking to everyone. And I went outside into the living room outside of his room, and I saw people falling to the ground, just overwhelmed. Several people were saying, I have never had an experience of Krishna consciousness in my entire life like that. I had never seen anything like this in my life. After everyone left, I went back in the room. I said, Maharaj, I've seen you give so many lectures and so many darshans and so many meetings. And I've seen how you inspire people and how you affect people. But I have never, ever, ever seen anything like this. And he smiled, and tears were in his eyes. He said, I've been praying to Srila Prabhupada that I could help the devotees of our movement. And because I'm in this condition that I am today, people are so receptive to what I say and who I am. He said, I am so grateful to Krishna that he has put me in this condition. It's a small price for being able to affect people in this way. And then he began to describe Vasudev Datta. He said, my whole devotional life almost, I wanted to acquire this spirit of Vasudev Datta. And I've been moving closer and closer. And now Srila Prabhupada is fulfilling my desire. For him to be in that suffering condition, of course he didn't like it, but he was grateful. If his going through the suffering and if his leaving everything behind in this world any day, if it's helping devotees be inspired with deeper faith and confidence and enthusiasm, it's a small price. Again, doesn't get any better than this. Doesn't get any better than this. On one level means he's tasting the sweetness of the holy name, and he's feeling his heart being transformed to Goloka Vrindavan. And in another setting, it doesn't get any better than this. Because in his suffering, people are taking Srila Prabhupada's message so seriously. Srila Prabhupada's divine grace from his service. He reasons ill who say that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still and sound. Vaishnavas die to live, and live to spread the holy name around. In this room, in the presence of Radha Damodar, Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa son, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, with genuine humility, expressed his gratitude to all of the assembled devotees for accepting his service. He did not say you should all be grateful to me for what I've given you, but rather he was expressing his gratitude to us for accepting his service. And as we spoke yesterday, Srila Prabhupada's last words to him, it is only Krishna's mercy. It is all Krishna's mercy. He gave his life to be an instrument of Srila Prabhupada, Radharani, and Krishna's mercy. And at the end of his pastimes in this physical world, while he was internally deeply absorbed in the eternal pastimes of Vrindavan, and the incredible realizations and gifts that Srila Prabhupada was revealing to him in those last weeks. And it was being expressed through his gratitude to you and me and all the devotees in the future. When Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was speaking to the devotees in the room on that day, he was speaking to all the devotees in the room today and all devotees all over the world. He was simply thanking us for allowing him to serve us by giving Srila Prabhupada's divine grace. Thou art living still and sound. Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj and all of our great acharyas, they are truly living through their example and through their instructions. Living far more and far more deeply than in their physical form when we receive those instructions and we reciprocate. For disciples, followers of Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, please do know that whenever you're striving to hear from him, to reciprocate with him, to serve his desires, to chant the holy name sincerely, to read from Srila Prabhupada's book sincerely, to love one another like he loved all of us, to spread this great mission. Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj is living within your heart and within your life. He described how after Srila Prabhupada left this world, those devotees who took his instruction so seriously and felt his presence, even today they are spreading our movement in incredible ways. It's not that devotees could ever do that without Srila Prabhupada's presence empowering them. This is parampara. Preaching in his last lecture, he described in such a way that we should not try to imitate him. He said it is dangerous, but we should emulate and appreciate this which he did it. But to do things the way he did it, unless Srila Prabhupada embraced you and cried and all that, we don't have the realizations. He was empowered. I'm so deeply honored and grateful to Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj, not only for his mercy upon his fallen little brother, but for blessing me, not only with the remembrance of his most compassionate, loving friendship, but for continuing to nourish me through all of you, those who he loved, and those who love him. Thank you very much.